My name is Terry Demeo, and I'm from Miami, Florida. Well, I'm like my mother in that we both like to drive cars really, really fast. And my mother taught me how to swear like a sailor, and I do that really well too. I'm not like her. Well, my mother was an alcoholic, and I'm not. My mother never had education. I was educated as a lawyer. And she didn't live very long. I've outlived her by 20 years, so we're very different in that regard. I was 23 when my mother drank herself to death. She was 46. I always wondered what troubled her so much. Why did she pass out at my fourth grade school play? Why did ambulances come in the middle of the night? Why did she try to hang herself in the garage? And why did I, in particular, vex her so much? She was shy and sheltered and grew up in a small town in East Texas in the 1930s. She never went to college, and the only job she ever had was as a Rosie the Riveter. I always thought she was pretty, but she drew mustaches and goatees on every photograph I ever saw of her. She told me it was because she didn't like her looks. She always had a few women friends who came over to play gin rummy and gossip. They were glamorous women with bright red nails and platinum hair wound into French twists. They wore high heels and brightly colored dresses, tightly belted at their waists. As a child, I wished my mother were more like them. My mother wore plain dresses in drab colors. Her hair was short, practical, and she didn't wear makeup except for lipstick when she left the house. Her friends wore lipstick and rouge and eyebrow pencil. They threw back their heads and laughed at her dark, sardonic jokes. My mother never laughed like that. I thought she had as nice a life as a woman could have in the 1950s. She had a hardworking husband and two well-behaved kids, a big house with a sprawling yard, and her own brand new Thunderbird. We had a full-time maid who looked after the house and took care of my brother and me. She saw her psychiatrist every week and went to AA, but it didn't help. Once, she spent a year in a mental hospital. My brother and I were sent to live in a boarding school. He was 5, I was 6. When we all came home, she told me about the shock therapy she'd been given. It wasn't long before she was drinking again. On good days, she rode horses, played saxophone, and ate BLT sandwiches at the kitchen table with my brother and me. On bad days, she drank scotch from a bottle she kept tucked between the towels in the linen closet until she couldn't stand. And on those days, she had little tolerance for me. I'd beg her to watch me do a pirouette, or sing a song, or come to a tea party with me and my dolls. She'd lose her temper and cut a switch from a bush in the backyard and whip the backs of my bare legs until they were covered with welts. When I asked her why she didn't whip my brother like that, she said he wasn't bad like I was. Sometimes she said I had a funny nose like Bunky, a cartoon character from her childhood. Bunky had a bulbous nose as big as his head. I tried so hard, but I had no idea how to please her. I brought her jars filled with red hibiscuses and made her sequined earrings with my arts and crafts kit. After she died, I found a card I'd made her when she was in the hospital. It had purple violets and silver glitter on it. Inside, I wrote, "Please come home soon. I am a good girl." She'd given me a boy's name, Terry, and painted my room blue, even though I begged her for a pink room with ruffled curtains. She cut my hair short when I wanted it long, and when I wanted a bright pink sweater with pearl buttons in the children's store, she told me to stop trying to look like a gypsy and got me a plain tan one. Tan. I hated that muddy tan sweater. I still remember the tag in it. It had neat gold script that said 100% Orlan. Every time I wore it, I felt sad. When I was 12, my father left after years of bitter fighting. One night, not long after, I knocked at her bedroom door. Maybe I wanted something in her room. Maybe I wanted to ask her a question. I can't remember, but I'd knocked a few times and gotten no response. I finally opened the unlocked door and peeked in. The lights were on. My mother was in bed with one of her women friends. They were naked and so absorbed with each other they never saw me. I quietly closed the door and ran to my room. I curled up and rocked myself for hours. I didn't know what it meant or what to do, and there was no one I could go to. I told myself she was too drunk to know what she was doing and tried never to think about it again. I kept that memory a secret until long after her death. But it was far too vivid and disturbing to ever forget. Last year, I spent an afternoon with my 94-year-old aunt. We looked at family photos and found an old black and white snapshot of my mother, young and smiling. She was a beautiful woman, my aunt said, smart and beautiful. When did she start drinking, I asked. She was already drinking when your father met her, she said. And he married her anyway? She shrugged. He had to. She was pregnant with you. That conversation with my aunt gave me the courage to take the memories of my mother out of hiding and put them all together. Everything pointed to one inescapable truth. My mother was a lesbian. I was the terrible mistake that trapped my mother in a life she hated. She lived in a time and a place where being who she was would never be possible. Knowing this was a relief. I understood. I understood her. I could forgive and love her again. Her wrath was never about me. I was always a good girl.